Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. The galaxy was a vast, dangerous place. Among its swirling stars and endless reaches, there were those who rose to power through cunning, violence, or sheer force of will. And then there was her, Zara Thorne, the most wanted criminal in the galaxy. A name whispered in the dark corners of countless star systems, she was a rogue who had lived a life of rebellion, defying the empire that ruled with an iron fist. And now she was running out of places to hide. Zara had been born a noblewoman, her family tied to the highest echelons of the Galactic Empire, but when the Empire had committed atrocities against her people, she had been the one to stand up. The galaxy had never forgiven her for it. Now, marked by bounty hunters and mercenaries, she lived in constant motion, her once grand name reduced to a curse. She had betrayed the Empire, but her betrayal had been her only path to freedom. For years, Zara had fought her battles alone, with nothing but her wits and a network of loyal followers keeping her alive. But as the Empire's grip tightened, it became clear that no one, no matter how skilled or resourceful, could stand alone against the might of an empire that controlled entire star systems. The Empire had sent their best hunter after her, Lauren, a ruthless assassin feared across the galaxy. And now it had all come down to this. On the edge of the galaxy, in a forgotten corner of a war-torn world, Zara stood outside the crumbling walls of a dilapidated outpost, knowing that her time was running out. Her pursuers were closing in, and she had only one option left, an option she had sworn she would never take. Her hand trembled as she pulled up her communication device, sending a single encrypted message. I need your help. Meet me on the planet Valoran. I'm out of options. She didn't wait for a reply. She couldn't afford to. As soon as the message was sent, she dropped the device into the nearby river, watching it vanish beneath the rushing waters. Her eyes scanned the horizon, a storm of dread and uncertainty churning within her. A heavy footfall sounded behind her, and Zara's instincts kicked in. She spun around, hands ready to draw her weapon, but the figure before her was not the one she had been expecting. Standing in the shadows of the outpost's ruins, a tall, broad-shouldered figure stepped into the fading light. He was human, a man, dressed in battle-worn armor that looked like it had seen countless wars. His face was hidden beneath a dark helmet, but Zara didn't need to see his expression to know who he was. She could feel the weight of his presence, the steady pulse of his calm confidence. It was unmistakable. You came, Zara whispered, almost in disbelief. The man, who went by the name of Cole Bradford, was someone Zara had only ever heard of in rumors. A former soldier of the Human Federation, he was infamous for his deadly skill in combat and his reputation as a mercenary who always completed his mission, no matter the cost. But it wasn't his skills that had drawn Zara's attention. It was his loyalty. Though humans were often considered primitive by the more advanced species of the galaxy, there was something different about them. A sense of honor, a drive to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Zara had heard the stories. And now she had to hope that the rumors were true. Thought you'd be taller, Zara said, trying to mask the anxiety in her voice. And more terrifying. Cole's helmet shifted slightly, though Zara could not see his face. She could, however, feel the cold presence of his gaze through the visor. I'm not here to impress you. His voice rumbled, low and steady. I'm here to get you out of this mess. Zara's breath caught in her throat. You understand what you're getting yourself into? Lauren is hunting me. And if he finds out you're helping me, he'll what? Cole interrupted, his voice laced with an edge of frustration. He'll send more mercenaries? The galaxy's filled with killers, Zara. I've dealt with worse. Zara raised an eyebrow. Worse than Lauren? Cole didn't hesitate. Yes. The confidence in his voice made her pause. She had to admit, it was a rare thing to encounter someone who spoke of Lauren with such nonchalance. Most people would cower at the mention of the assassin's name. But Cole's expression, though hidden, seemed unreadable. He didn't seem afraid. If anything, he was already calculating his next move, mentally preparing for the confrontation that was inevitable. Zara took a step closer, lowering her voice. I don't know if I can trust you, she admitted, a tinge of doubt creeping in. I've had so many betrayals in my life. I don't know if I can risk it again. Cole seemed to study her for a moment, and then his voice softened, the roughness of his tone smoothing out just a touch. I don't expect you to trust me right away, he said. But I'm not leaving you to die. Not without a fight. And with that, the weight of Zara's decision settled in her chest. She had always been a woman who fought alone. But maybe, just maybe, the time had come to let someone else fight by her side. Zara's heart raced as she stood there, facing Cole. The weight of his words hung in the air, but it wasn't his promise of protection that she found unsettling. It was the fact that for the first time in years she didn't feel completely alone. It was a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to experience since she had fled the Empire's clutches. And yet, here it was, a small but undeniable thread of hope. Cole's hand rested on the hilt of his weapon, an old, well-maintained plasma blade that hung at his side like an extension of his body. His armor, worn and scarred from countless battles, seemed to radiate an aura of quiet authority. The man was a force, an unyielding presence in a universe that thrived on chaos. Zara didn't know what had brought him to her aid, but she had no choice but to trust him now. "You need to get off this planet," Cole said, his voice steady, commanding. "Lauren's already on his way. And if he catches your scent here, we'll have every bounty hunter in the sector on our tail." Zara's eyes flicked over the ruined outpost, trying to assess the situation. The landscape was desolate, with crumbling buildings and the remnants of a long-forgotten war scattered like forgotten bones. The once bustling mining colony had been abandoned years ago, but Zara had always felt safer here, hidden from the Empire's prying eyes. "I can't leave," Zara said, her voice tight. "Not yet. I need to make contact with someone. A friend. Someone who can help me with the supplies we'll need to escape. I've got a ship, but it's not enough to outrun Lauren." Cole's gaze didn't waver. "We don't have time for friends. You need to get somewhere safe, and I'm the only one who can get you there." Zara clenched her fists, frustration building. "I don't want to hide. I want to fight back. I've spent my entire life running from the Empire, running from Lauren, and I'm done. If I have to live in hiding, what's the point of surviving?" For a moment there was silence between them. Cole's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a subtle shift that told Zara he understood more than he let on. His hand moved slowly to his weapon as if testing its weight, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he turned his back to her and began scanning the horizon, his sharp eyes sweeping the landscape. "You're not alone anymore," he said finally, his voice softer than before. "But you need to understand something. Survival isn't about fighting for glory, it's about making it through long enough to fight when you're ready. And right now we're not ready." Zara felt the sting of his words, but she knew he was right. Lauren wasn't just another bounty hunter. He was a machine, an assassin trained in every form of combat, enhanced by technology and ruthless beyond reason. There were no shortcuts to dealing with him. No easy solutions. As much as it pained her, Zara realized that Cole was right. Running might be the only option she had. For now. "I've heard of him," Cole continued, his voice now carrying the weight of experience. "Lauren is no ordinary hunter. He's not interested in the bounty. He's interested in making a statement. If you cross him, he doesn't just kill you, he takes everything from you. Your friends, your family, your freedom. He makes sure you die slowly." Zara's stomach twisted at the thought. She had seen his handiwork, heard the stories. Lauren left no survivors, no witnesses. His methodical, cold-blooded efficiency was the stuff of nightmares. And she knew, deep down, that he was more than capable of bringing her to the edge of despair before snuffing out her life completely. "Then we'll have to outsmart him," she said, her voice hardening. "You said you've dealt with worse. So what's our play?" Cole turned to face her fully, his eyes narrowing with determination. "First, we need to leave this planet. But we can't just take off. Lauren knows your every move, Zara. He'll be waiting for us at the port." Zara felt her stomach churn. The ship she had hidden on Valoran was her only hope, the last tether to her freedom. If Lauren caught wind of it, it would be a death sentence. But Cole was right. They couldn't stay here. The Empire's forces were closing in, and they would soon be overwhelmed by bounty hunters eager to collect on Zara's head. "We'll need a diversion," Cole said, his voice cool with calculation. "Something big enough to pull his attention away. A staged fight maybe. We set up a trap." Zara nodded, her mind already racing through possibilities. "We can use the old cargo tunnels beneath the city. They're still functional. If we can get to the lower levels, I can rig an old weapon cache to trigger a massive explosion. It'll draw Lauren and his men to the surface, while we slip away unnoticed." Cole's lips quirked upward ever so slightly, almost a smile. "I knew you'd have a plan. You're not as helpless as you look." Zara met his gaze with a flicker of pride. "I never said I was helpless. I just had to learn to trust the right people." For a brief moment, the tension between them shifted. Zara realized that, despite everything, Cole was right. She wasn't alone anymore. She had him now, and that made all the difference. "Let's move," Cole said, his voice steady. "We don't have much time." With that, the two of them set off toward the depths of the city, a dangerous and uncertain future awaiting them both. The stakes were higher than ever and Lauren was closing in fast. But Zara was no longer fighting this battle alone. The odds may have been against them, but with Cole by her side she felt ready to face whatever came next. And in a galaxy where survival often meant losing everything, Zara knew one thing for sure: she would fight back. The cargo tunnels beneath the city of Valoran were a relic of the planet's industrial past. Once used to ferry resources from the mines to the starport, now little more than a maze of rusting metal and long-abandoned machinery. It had been years since anyone had used these tunnels, but Zara knew them well. She had spent countless hours here, evading bounty hunters and smugglers, learning every twist and turn like the back of her hand. Cole followed her without question, his heavy footsteps echoing off the walls as they descended into the darkness. The air was thick with the scent of old fuel and dust, the faint hum of ancient systems barely audible. Zara activated a small flashlight, its beams slicing through the gloom as she led the way deeper into the bowels of the city. She could feel the weight of Cole's presence behind her, a comforting but unnerving reminder that her survival now rested on his shoulders as much as her own. "You've been down here before?" Cole asked, his voice low, reverberating off the cold metal walls. Zara didn't look back, but she could hear the hint of curiosity in his tone. "A few times. These tunnels were supposed to be used to move ore, but the city's population dwindled when the mining operations shut down. The place has been empty for years. No one's bothered to reclaim it. Perfect hiding place," Cole muttered. "If we're not careful, we'll end up lost in here." Zara smiled grimly, her mind already on their next move. "I can navigate it. Follow me." They moved in silence for a while, the only sounds their breathing and the occasional scrape of metal on metal as they passed broken machinery. Zara's thoughts were racing. They had a plan, a decent one at least, but even she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that it was a gamble. If Lauren was as skilled as everyone said, the diversion wouldn't be enough. It had to work though. They had no choice. As they reached a narrow passageway that led to a maintenance room, Zara stopped, her fingers brushing against the metal door. She paused for a moment, listening carefully. In the distance, she could hear the faint hum of engines, familiar but far too close for comfort. "We're running out of time," Cole said, stepping up behind her. "How long until we can make the diversion?" Zara glanced back at him, feeling the tension in the air between them. She was still calculating the risks in her mind. "I need to get to the weapon cache and set the trigger. Once it's armed, we have maybe 5 minutes before the blast goes off." Cole grunted in acknowledgement, his hand resting on the plasma blade at his side. 5 minutes. Got it?" Zara turned back to the door, her fingers moving with practiced ease to bypass the old security system. The faint clicking sound of the lock disengaging echoed in the quiet tunnel. She pushed the door open just enough to slip inside, taking a moment to scan the room. It was cluttered with old crates, scattered tools and broken-down machines. At the far corner she saw what she had been looking for, an old weapons locker, its seal still intact though covered in dust. She moved quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to hurry. Even with the distraction she was about to create, the threat of Lauren still loomed large. If he was as skilled as rumored, the bomb would only buy them so much time. They needed to be out of the city before Lauren zeroed in on their location. Zara knelt in front of the locker, quickly accessing the hidden panel that controlled its release. Inside were several blasters, grenades, and a few other tools of destruction. But what she was after was the detonator, a device that would trigger the explosion she'd set earlier in the tunnels. She grabbed the detonator, attaching it to a small charge hidden beneath the floorboards. The blast would be huge, enough to cause a significant distraction and potentially cripple any pursuit Lauren's team might have. But it wouldn't be enough to stop Lauren for long. No, that was where Cole came in. She would need him to keep Lauren occupied while she made her escape. "Got it," Zara muttered under her breath as she double-checked the settings on the detonator. She slipped it into her jacket pocket and motioned to Cole. "We're good to go." Cole was already standing at the doorway, scanning the tunnels with his sharp eyes. "Lead the way." As they moved back toward the main tunnel, the air seemed to grow heavier with every step. Zara could feel the pull of the moment, the weight of what was about to happen. They were heading into enemy territory. No, it wasn't just Lauren's territory anymore. It was a battlefield, one where the stakes were more than just life or death. The galaxy was watching, and Zara knew that if they failed, it would be the end of everything she had fought for. They passed through several corridors, moving with increasing speed. The sounds of the distant engines were louder now, closer. Lauren was nearing. The entire city was alive with the tension of the hunt, and Zara could feel the shift in the air as they moved toward the outermost parts of the complex. The plan was simple: cause a distraction big enough to draw Lauren's attention to the surface, then escape through the maintenance shafts at the back. But just as they reached the final passage, the worst happened. A sharp crack echoed through the tunnel, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots on metal. Cole immediately turned, his weapon drawn in a single fluid motion, his body shifting into a defensive stance. Zara froze, her eyes narrowing as she instinctively reached for her own blaster. They weren't alone anymore. "Thought you could run, Zara?" The voice that rang out through the narrow passageway was cold, calculating, and unmistakably lethal. "I've been tracking you for days. You can't hide from me." Zara's pulse quickened as the figure of Lauren appeared from the shadows. The assassin's tall, imposing form moved with predatory grace, his eyes cold as ice. His armor, sleek and black, gleamed in the dim light. There was no emotion in his gaze, only the certainty that he was about to end this chase. "Stay behind me," Cole whispered to Zara, his voice barely audible but the command clear. His hand tightened around the grip of his weapon as he stepped forward. Lauren didn't hesitate. He lunged toward them, faster than Zara had expected. The hunt was on. The atmosphere in the tunnel thickened with an icy tension, the air heavy with the impending clash. Zara's heart hammered in her chest as Lauren advanced, his figure a silhouette of menace. The assassin moved with unnatural speed, his black armor gleaming like polished obsidian in the dim light. She could see the cold precision in his every step, a predator closing in on its prey. Cole stepped forward, his hand tightening around the hilt of his plasma blade. His movements were smooth, practiced, too calm for someone about to face one of the deadliest hunters in the galaxy. His stance was defensive, but Zara knew he was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He was sizing Lauren up, analyzing every subtle shift in the assassin's body language. "Thought you could escape," Lauren's voice sliced through the tension, cold and mocking. "You're a clever woman, Zara. But in the end you're still just a fugitive. And fugitives run. They don't fight." Zara gritted her teeth, keeping her hand near her own blaster. "I don't run anymore." Her voice was steady, but the truth was she wasn't entirely sure she could stand her ground against Lauren, not without Cole's help. The assassin was a master of his craft, trained in every conceivable form of combat, enhanced by cybernetic implants that made him faster, stronger, and far more dangerous than any human. She'd heard the stories of his brutality, how he had taken down entire crews of mercenaries without breaking a sweat. He was not just a bounty hunter, he was a living weapon. Cole didn't respond to Lauren's taunt. Instead, he shifted his weight, eyes locked on the assassin's every movement. Zara watched him, the calm determination in his gaze giving her a sliver of hope. If anyone could take on Lauren and survive, it was him. But she had to admit the odds were slim. Lauren's eyes flicked briefly to Zara, a cold smirk pulling at the corners of his lips. "You think he can protect you?" he sneered. "You've always relied on others, haven't you, Zara? Even now you're clinging to a human. Pathetic." Zara's pulse quickened at the insult. She wasn't used to being mocked, especially by someone like Lauren. The more he spoke, the more she realized how deeply personal this pursuit had become for him. He didn't just want her dead, he wanted her broken. "I don't need anyone," Zara said, her voice sharp. "And neither do you." With a sudden, fluid motion, she drew her blaster and fired. The shot rang out, striking the wall just inches from Lauren's head as he instinctively ducked to the side, his reflexes a blur of speed. It was a feint, a distraction. Zara was stalling, trying to buy them both time. Lauren didn't flinch. Instead, he let out a low laugh, his voice echoing in the narrow tunnel. "You're going to have to do better than that." Before she could react, Lauren lunged. In the blink of an eye, he closed the distance between them, his hand sweeping through the air with a glowing blade that materialized from the hilt on his wrist. The plasma blade hissed through the air with lethal precision as it cut toward Cole. But Cole was faster. In a single, seamless motion, he dodged to the side, the plasma blade missing him by mere inches. His own weapon, a heavier, broader blade, flashed in the dim light as he countered with a slash aimed at Lauren's side. The two weapons clashed with a sound like thunder, a shower of sparks flying from the point of impact. Zara's eyes widened in shock. Cole was holding his own, no more than holding his own. The human was matching Lauren's speed and skill, his blade a blur of deadly strikes and parries. Each movement was calculated, executed with military precision. Zara had always known Cole was a trained soldier, but seeing him in action, up close, was something else entirely. This wasn't just about brute force, this was strategy. The fight was a dance, each blow a calculated maneuver. Lauren's eyes narrowed with frustration. He had underestimated Cole. With a growl he pushed forward, his blade a vicious arc aimed at Cole's chest. But Cole anticipated the move, twisting to the side and knocking Lauren's strike off course with a swift parry. The force of the blow sent a shockwave through the tunnel, causing the walls to tremble. Zara watched in awe, her instinct screaming that this was their only chance. She had to act now before Lauren recovered. She moved swiftly, her body already in motion before she had fully processed the thought. Her blaster came up again, this time aimed at Lauren's exposed back. She squeezed the trigger, the shot ringing out. Lauren spun at the last possible moment, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to deflect the shot with his blade. But it was enough. For the briefest second, his guard was down and Cole seized the opportunity. With a roar, Cole advanced, his blade cutting through the air with brutal efficiency. Lauren barely had time to react before Cole's weapon struck his armor. The assassin's cybernetic enhancements took the brunt of the blow, but the impact still sent him staggering backward, momentarily disoriented. Now? Cole shouted, his voice low but fierce. Zara didn't hesitate. She was already on the move, darting toward the maintenance shaft. The detonator in her pocket weighed heavily on her, but she couldn't afford to waste any more time. She had to set the trap in motion. As she reached the access panel to the maintenance shaft, she hit the button to open it. The door slid open with a hiss of pressure, revealing the narrow corridor beyond. She didn't look back. Her pulse was thundering in her ears, the sounds of the fight still echoing through the tunnel behind her. She could feel the seconds slipping away. But just as she was about to slip inside the shaft, a sharp cry cut through the air, a sound of pain. Zara froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She turned just in time to see Cole stagger, his back arched in a defensive posture. Lauren had closed in, and in that single brutal moment of distraction he had struck. The assassin's blade was buried deep in Cole's side. No? Zara screamed. Time seemed to slow. The world around her blurred as the reality of the situation sank in. Cole was injured, badly. And they were running out of time. Zara's breath caught in her throat. If they didn't act now, all would be lost. The world seemed to shatter in slow motion as Cole stumbled, his face contorting with pain. His hand instinctively clutched at the wound, blood seeping through his fingers as he fell to one knee. The plasma blade had pierced deep into his side, the burn of the weapon sizzling through his armor and into his flesh. For a moment, Zara couldn't move, her body frozen in place as she watched him fall. The man who had fought beside her, who had promised her protection, was now bleeding out in front of her. Lauren stood over him, the assassin's face cold and unreadable. The hum of his plasma blade still echoed in the silence, a stark contrast to the chaos Zara felt inside. It was impossible. She had just seen Cole dodge Lauren's attacks with ease moments ago, but now the human warrior was on the ground, vulnerable and weak. Don't you dare!" Zara shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. Without thinking, she pulled out her blaster and aimed it at Lauren, her hands trembling with the weight of the moment. She squeezed the trigger, but before the shot could even leave the barrel, Lauren's reaction was instantaneous. He flicked his wrist, the plasma blade flickering in a blur of motion as it deflected her shot with a precise flick. The bolt of energy ricocheted harmlessly into the ceiling, igniting a spark of debris that rained down around them. Lauren turned slowly, his smirk widening as he saw the fear in Zara's eyes. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered, his voice like ice. "Your friend is done. There's nothing left to protect you now." Her pulse hammered in her chest, but Zara was no longer frozen in fear. Something inside her snapped. This was it. There would be no more running, no more hiding. Lauren had crossed a line. She couldn't let him take Cole, not after everything they had fought for. "Get away from him," she shouted, rushing forward despite the odds. But Lauren was faster. With a swift movement, he raised his blade, and the arc of energy crackled through the air, aimed directly at Zara's head. It was a kill shot and he didn't hesitate. Time seemed to stretch as she instinctively ducked, her body twisting out of the way just in time. The blade skimmed her hair, singeing the edges of her jacket as it passed. Zara tumbled to the ground, rolling out of the path of another strike. "Not this time," Lauren said, his voice mocking as he advanced. Zara's mind raced. She had no time to think, no time to plan. She couldn't outrun him, and even if she could, Cole wouldn't survive long enough to escape. She needed a way to stop him, and it had to be now. In a flash of inspiration, Zara remembered the detonator. The one she had stashed in her pocket moments earlier. The one that could buy them time. But she had to get close enough to activate it, and Lauren wasn't going to let that happen without a fight. As Lauren took another step toward her, his blade glowing with murderous intent, Zara made her move. She feinted to the left, then rolled to the right, narrowly avoiding another strike. She could feel the heat of the plasma blade as it passed so close to her that it singed her skin. She wasn't fast enough to beat Lauren in a direct fight, but she could outsmart him. She had done it before. Her eyes darted around and then she saw it, an old maintenance console half hidden behind a pile of discarded equipment. If she could reach it, there might be a way to trigger the explosion remotely, distracting Lauren long enough to give them a fighting chance. "Are you done running?" Lauren taunted, his voice full of venom. He was enjoying this. She could see it in the way he moved, casual, almost bored. This wasn't just about capturing her anymore, it was about making her suffer. "I'm not running," Zara snarled, her voice filled with a determination that surprised even her. She wasn't the same frightened fugitive she had been when they first met. The pain of losing Cole wasn't going to be her end, it was going to fuel her. With a sudden burst of energy, Zara sprinted toward the console. She heard Lauren's footfalls behind her, but she didn't dare look back. The panel was just ahead, she could make it. The moment her fingers hit the console, she felt the surge of hope that came with the knowledge that she might just have a chance to survive this. She pressed the button to trigger the detonator, her fingers shaking as she punched in the last command. A low hum filled the air as the countdown began. Zara's heart raced. There was no turning back now. The blast would take out the area around them, but it would also draw every bounty hunter and mercenary in the sector. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was the only play left. Lauren cursed as he saw what she was doing, realizing too late that she had tricked him. He charged at her, his blade aimed for her neck. Zara ducked, narrowly avoiding the strike. She couldn't keep running forever, not with him so close. But she had done it, she had triggered the explosion. The ground trembled as a massive explosion erupted in the distance. The shockwave reverberated through the tunnels, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. Zara's ears rang, her vision blurry as the force of the blast knocked her off her feet. She crashed to the ground, the impact sending waves of pain through her body. For a split second, everything went silent. Then the roar of flames and falling rubble filled the air, followed by the sound of distant alarms blaring as the city's security systems went haywire. Zara's head spun, but she forced herself to her knees. She had to keep moving. Cole, she needed to get to Cole. When the smoke cleared, she saw him. He was still there, barely conscious, leaning against the wall for support, his face pale and covered in sweat. Blood stained his armor, but he was alive. "Cole," she cried, scrambling to his side. He looked up at her, his eyes unfocused but still filled with that unbreakable will she had come to admire. "You did it," he rasped, his voice weak. "You really did it?" "Don't talk," Zara said urgently, helping him to his feet. She could hear the sound of Lauren's approach, the assassin moving through the smoke with purpose. The explosion had been a temporary distraction, but they wouldn't have long before he caught up. Zara hoisted Cole up, wrapping his arm around her shoulders for support. She could feel his weight dragging her down, but there was no time to waste. They had to get out, now. Lauren was closing in, but Zara wasn't about to let him have the last word. With the detonator still in her pocket and her only ally by her side, she began to move forward, away from the fight, away from the city. She wasn't running anymore. She was fighting for the future, hers, Cole's, and the galaxy's. And she wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. The explosion had done its work, but it was only a temporary reprieve. Zara could feel the heat of the blast still lingering in the air as she helped Cole limp through the wreckage of the tunnel. The tremors from the explosion had cracked the walls and caused a few small fires to erupt in the surrounding debris. The air was thick with smoke and dust, making it hard to see, harder still to breathe. "Zara, I don't think I can make it much longer." Cole's voice was strained, his words laced with pain. He was pale, his hand pressed tightly to his wound, but his grip on her shoulder was strong. Despite everything, he wasn't giving up. "Yes, you can," Zara said, her voice fierce. She forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're almost out of here. We just have to keep moving." The tunnels ahead were a maze of shadow and fire, the path unclear. The blast had done more than just disrupt Lauren's pursuit. It had crippled the city's security systems, causing chaos to ripple through the infrastructure. But Zara knew that wouldn't stop Lauren. It would only slow him down, and he was smart enough to know that time was on his side. "We have to get to the surface," Zara muttered, her gaze scanning the darkness ahead. "There's an extraction point there, a ship that can get us off planet. We just need to make it." A sharp crack of metal echoed behind them, cutting her off mid-sentence. Zara froze, her blood turning cold. Cole's hand tightened around her arm, and she could see the grim look in his eyes, though he was too injured to fully stand on his own. "He's coming," Cole whispered as though he could already feel Lauren closing in. "We can't outrun him much longer." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the distance, and Zara knew they had run out of time. Lauren was moving faster than they could. It was only a matter of seconds before he caught up with them. She couldn't let him capture them, not again. Not when they were so close to escaping. She had one chance left, one final play. But it would cost them everything. "Get ready," she said through gritted teeth, pulling Cole closer to her as she turned toward the walls of the tunnel. She scanned the debris, searching for something, anything that could give them an edge. Her eyes landed on a cluster of broken machinery, the remnants of a heavy turret that had been damaged in the blast. There. It might be a long shot, but it was their only shot. She dragged Cole toward it, pulling him with every ounce of strength she had left. "We're going to have to fight. You've got the strength to help me, don't you?" Cole didn't respond immediately. His face was drawn in pain, his body fighting to stay upright. But when he met her eyes, there was still that fire. That unshakable will. "I'll do what I can," he said, his voice steady despite the blood loss. Zara barely had time to give him a nod of reassurance before the sound of Lauren's boots grew louder, the assassin's cold laugh echoing through the tunnel. "You think you can escape, Zara?" Lauren's voice was laced with menace, calm as ever. "You've made your bet. Now lie in it." Zara pressed Cole's shoulder against the damaged turret as she worked quickly, tearing off broken pieces of metal and circuitry. She didn't know how much longer she had before Lauren reached them, but she was going to make it count. "You should have stayed out of my way," Lauren continued, his voice coming closer. "Now I'll finish what I started." Zara's hands moved frantically as she pieced together the remnants of the turret's control panel. She didn't have a lot of time, but if she could get the weapon systems online, if she could use it to trap Lauren at least for a moment, then they'd have a chance. "Stay low, Cole," she ordered, her voice grim. "He's coming." As if on cue, the shadows ahead of them shifted, and Lauren appeared from the smoke, his glowing blade held high. His figure was framed by the chaos around them, a perfect embodiment of death itself. "You've run out of options, Zara," he said, his tone calm, too calm. "It's over." Zara's hand slammed down on the button she had reactivated on the turret's control panel. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden surge of power, the turret's weapon systems roared to life, a burst of energy firing from the barrels. Lauren barely had time to react. He raised his plasma blade to deflect the incoming fire, but it was too much. The barrage of explosive energy hit him hard, throwing him backward with the force of an avalanche. The blast sent him crashing into a pile of debris, and for a moment there was silence. Zara didn't wait to see if it had finished the job. "Move," she shouted, grabbing Cole by the arm and hauling him to his feet. "Zara, wait," Cole gasped, his body trembling from pain. He's not finished. He'll come after us." "I know," she replied through clenched teeth, dragging him toward the exit. "But he won't get us today." They ran, the sound of their footsteps drowned out by the rumble of the still active turret behind them. The chaos of the blast had only delayed Lauren. He wasn't dead. Not yet. But they had bought themselves a small window of time. "How much further?" Cole asked, his voice strained. Zara barely looked back as they rounded a corner, the light from the surface ahead beckoning them. "Not far. Keep moving, we're almost there." The air grew colder as they neared the exit, the faint hum of engines on the surface growing louder. The extraction ship was waiting just beyond the last stretch of the tunnel, her only chance for survival. But as they neared the end of the tunnel, the ground trembled again. The blast had done its damage, but it had also weakened the already unstable structure of the tunnels. Rocks and debris began to rain down from above. "Move!" Zara screamed as she pulled Cole forward, but the sound of boots pounding behind them told her that Lauren had already recovered. They were running out of time. The tunnel was collapsing and Lauren was right on their heels. The extraction point was in sight, but Zara knew that they wouldn't make it unless they fought one last battle. She glanced at Cole. "Stay close. We finish this now." With the ship just ahead, she took one last breath, ready to face whatever came next. For her freedom, for Cole, she was going to survive this. And Lauren was not going to take that from her. Not today. The tunnel shook once more, the ceiling above them groaning as the structures gave way to the damage from the explosion. Zara barely registered the falling rocks and debris, her focus entirely on the distant light that flickered from the entrance to the surface. Every step was agony for Cole, his breath shallow and strained, his body moving with the urgency of survival, but it was clear the blood loss was taking its toll. "We're almost there," Zara grunted through clenched teeth, her grip on Cole's arm tightening. They had to make it to the ship. It was their only hope. Behind them, the sounds of Lauren's pursuit continued, relentless. She could hear the assassin's boots slamming against the ground, each step a reminder that their window was closing fast. Zara's mind raced, trying to devise a plan. She had only one shot left, and there was no room for failure. The opening ahead grew larger, the blinding light from the surface spilling into the darkness of the tunnel. They were close, so close, but it wasn't enough. She could hear Lauren gaining on them, his heavy footfalls growing louder with each passing second. He wasn't just a predator, he was a force of nature, a machine built for this very purpose. And he wasn't going to let them escape. "Keep moving," Zara urged Cole, her voice ragged. His face was drawn with pain, his movements growing slower. They were both pushing themselves beyond their limits, but she could see it in his eyes. He was determined to keep going, for her, for them. Another rumble shook the tunnel, and Zara saw a large piece of rock shift above them. "Move," she shouted again, pulling Cole into a sprint, not daring to look back. The light from the surface beckoned them forward, but it wasn't enough. They could feel the air growing thinner, the pressure of the collapsing tunnel forcing them forward, yet there was no sign of Lauren slowing. In fact, she could feel his presence drawing closer, his malevolent energy closing in. "Not yet," Zara whispered, her mind working in overdrive. She knew they couldn't outrun him, not without help. The ship was in sight, but it would take too long for them to get there in time. They were vulnerable in this narrow tunnel, exposed. Her eyes darted around frantically, searching for something, anything that could give them an advantage. Then she saw it. A large maintenance crate, half buried under debris, with a series of old explosives visible inside. It was a desperate plan, but it was all they had. "Cole?" Zara yelled, turning to him with wide eyes. "I need you to hold on." He barely managed a nod, his face contorted with effort. "What are you planning?" Zara's heart pounded as she ran to the crate, her hands shaking as she ripped open the broken metal lid. There, nestled among a pile of aged tech, were the explosives. Old but functional, likely designed for use in demolition. She didn't have time to read the labels or examine the devices. She grabbed the first one she could, frantically pulling the trigger mechanism and attaching it to a nearby support beam. The idea was simple: create an explosion that would force Lauren into a narrow bottleneck and slow him down long enough for them to escape. As she worked, the sound of Lauren's pursuit grew louder. He was close, too close. "Zara, we can't stay here." Cole's voice was urgent, but Zara couldn't leave yet. Not without one final push. "I know," she said, her eyes hardening. "But we're not running anymore." With a final twist, Zara set the explosives, triggering a countdown. She could hear Lauren's voice behind them, mocking, confident. He was toying with them now, and every second they delayed made him more dangerous. "You'll regret this," Lauren sneered, his voice carrying through the tunnel. "This will end in your death, Zara. You'll be nothing but a memory." Zara barely registered his words. She grabbed Cole, helping him to his feet once more, pushing him toward the exit. They had to get out before the blast went off. But as they neared the surface entrance, a shadow loomed over them. Lauren appeared in the doorway, blocking their path. He stood there, his glowing blade in hand, a twisted smile on his face. "Did you think you could escape me?" Lauren's voice was dark and calm, the finality of his words hanging in the air. He was confident, too confident. Zara didn't hesitate. She pushed Cole back behind her, her eyes burning with resolve. "We're not finished yet." Without warning, she drew her blaster and fired a single shot at Lauren's chest. The shot rang out, a blast of energy that struck him square in the chest. But Lauren didn't flinch. His armor absorbed the shot with ease, and he laughed, his voice cold and mocking. "That was pathetic," he sneered. Zara's heart raced, but she had no time to think. The countdown on the explosives was almost up. "Get down," she shouted, pushing Cole to the ground as she dove beside him. The world erupted in a deafening roar as the explosives detonated. The force of the blast shook the tunnel, sending shockwaves through the air. The ground trembled beneath them as debris and rock rained down from above. The blast itself was powerful enough to send Lauren stumbling backward, his form momentarily obscured by the thick cloud of dust and debris. But he was still alive. Zara scrambled to her feet, pulling Cole up with her. They couldn't wait any longer. The exit was open, the sky visible above them. The extraction ship was only a few dozen meters away, its engines already warming up in preparation for their escape. "Go!" Zara screamed, pushing Cole toward the ship. Cole stumbled, but with Zara's help he managed to keep moving, their escape just within reach. But then as they neared the ship, Lauren reappeared from the dust, his blade drawn and ready. His eyes locked on them with cold hatred and Zara's heart sank. They were so close. Too close. You think you've won? Lauren growled. You're just delaying the inevitable. Zara didn't answer. She grabbed Cole by the arm and pulled him toward the ship, her pulse racing. The ship's engines roared to life, the blast doors already opening to welcome them. Lauren wasn't far behind, his weapon crackling with energy. He was relentless, but Zara refused to let him take them now. Not after everything they'd been through. In a desperate move, Zara turned to face Lauren. She reached into her belt and pulled out the last of her explosives, hurling it directly at the assassin. Run, she shouted to Cole. Cole hesitated for a moment, then sprinted toward the ship. Zara's heart pounded as she watched the explosive device rocket toward Lauren. He reacted too late, his eyes widening in realization just as the device detonated. The explosion sent a shockwave through the air, and Lauren's figure disappeared into the smoke and debris. For a moment, Zara wasn't sure if the blast had been enough to finish him off. But there was no time to waste. With Cole by her side, she dove into the ship's cargo hold just as the blast doors closed behind them. The engines roared to life, and the ship shot into the air, breaking free from the atmosphere. Zara collapsed into a seat, her body shaking with exhaustion. We made it, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Cole sat beside her, equally exhausted but alive. Yeah, he said, his voice hoarse. We made it. Zara looked out the window, watching as the planet receded behind them. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe, the weight of everything they had survived settling over her like a heavy blanket. But she knew one thing, they were free. And that was all that mattered. For now. The ship's hum was the only sound that filled the cargo hold as Zara stared out the small porthole, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The planet that had been her prison was now a distant speck in the black expanse of space, shrinking with each passing second. The feeling of escape was overwhelming, but beneath it, there was still a gnawing sense of something unresolved. Cole sat beside her, his breathing still labored, but his eyes were clearer now, no longer clouded by pain. He glanced at her, offering a weary but reassuring smile. You did it, he said, his voice low but filled with gratitude. We did it. Zara didn't respond immediately. She let his words linger in the air, feeling the weight of everything they had been through. The escape, the explosions, the narrow misses, it was all so much, so fast. But for once it felt like they had truly won. For a moment she let herself believe that it was over, that they were truly free. Then the memories began to creep back in. The faces of the men and women she had lost, the battles they'd fought and the enemies they'd left behind, all of it was still there, lurking in the shadows of her mind. We're not out of danger yet, Zara said quietly, her voice steady but filled with resolve. Lauren isn't the only one after us. We've got more enemies out there and they'll come for us eventually. Cole nodded, though the exhaustion in his face still made him seem a bit fragile. He reached out, taking her hand gently in his. We've survived worse, haven't we? Zara met his gaze, her lips curving into a small, bittersweet smile. Yeah, we have. She looked away, her thoughts turning to what lay ahead. The universe was vast and there were so many places where they could go, so many lives they could start anew. But she knew that no matter where they went, they couldn't outrun the past. The past always had a way of catching up with them. The thought lingered as the ship cruised deeper into space, its engines humming in steady rhythm as the stars swirled in endless patterns outside the viewports. She turned her focus to the immediate future, what they would do now, where they could go from here. We need to make contact with the resistance, Zara said after a long pause, her voice steady. There's a bigger fight coming. We can't just hide forever. Cole didn't seem surprised by her declaration. He had seen the fire in her eyes, the indomitable will that had carried them both through the darkest of times. You're right, he said softly but with a hint of something deeper, something that reflected not just the exhaustion of their escape, but a shared understanding. You always know what to do. Zara's lips twitched into a faint smile. I don't always know what to do, but I know we can't sit idly by. Lauren might be dead or he might have survived that blast, but either way there are bigger players in this war. And we're not done yet. She stood up, walking over to the small navigation console and pulling up a map of the galaxy. Her fingers brushed across the touch screen, bringing up coordinates that were familiar to her. The Outer Rim Systems, a network of planets and moons known for their rebellion activity, resistance forces and neutral zones. It was there that they could regroup, rebuild, and most importantly, prepare for whatever threat was coming. The resistance is scattered, but we know where they're hiding. We'll need to gather intel, find allies, and prepare ourselves. If we're going to face what's coming, we need to be ready. Cole joined her, standing at her side as he studied the star map. Do you think they'll trust us after everything we've been through? Zara's eyes were hard, determined. It doesn't matter if they trust us. We'll show them we're worth trusting. As the ship sped toward the unknown, the thought of a new fight ahead seemed to both scare and excite her. The war for freedom was never truly over. She had learned that lesson long ago. There was always someone else, always another battle to fight, another war to win. I'll need you, Cole, Zara said, her voice quieter now. I can't do this alone. Cole squeezed her hand gently. I'm not going anywhere. There was a finality in his words that gave Zara a sense of peace. He had been her rock, her protector, and now they were in this together, no matter where the road ahead would lead them. They had fought together for so long, and though the battles ahead would undoubtedly be harder, the bond they shared was unbreakable. In a universe filled with chaos, corruption, and constant war, it was their connection that remained the one constant. And as long as they had that, they had a chance at survival, at victory. The ship cut through the stars like a knife, silent and unstoppable. For a brief moment, Zara allowed herself to close her eyes, leaning back in the seat as she took a deep breath. The weight of the past had not fully lifted, but she felt lighter, freer than she had in years. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, it didn't seem quite as impossible. The unknown stretched out before them, endless and full of challenges, but Zara knew one thing for certain. They had survived the worst. And no matter what happened next, they would face it together. The ship roared onward, its engines a steady rhythm in the vastness of space, as they left behind the shadows of their past and embraced the uncertain future ahead. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.